Now, I don't know about you guys, but for me, suspension is really one of the very first things that I want to modify when I buy a new to me car. Even before I get wheels and tires, I want to get that thing sitting just right, handling really good and sorted for some daily bully beatdown. Anyway, there are so many different ways to go about modifying your suspension at varying different price points, so it's no wonder that one of the most asked questions that we get here at Fitment Industries about suspension are how to choose the right suspension setup for your ride. Should you go with coilovers over lowering springs? Which coilovers should I get? When are lowering springs even appropriate? Or should I just go all out and bite the bullet on some air suspension? And is the extra money for premium brands worth it? Well, if that sounds like something you're curious about, then stick around, because today we're gonna talk about how to choose the right suspension for you. But before we get into all of that stuff, if you're new here, make sure to tap that subscribe button and give the video a thumbs up. And if you need anything, wheels, tires, or suspension, make sure to come see the experts over at fitmentindustries.com. If you like random quirky cars, big smoky burnouts, and want to see some behind the scenes action here at Fitment Industries, go ahead and give me a follow on Instagram at seanb.fi. Let's get started. So we're gonna go through this one from some of the least expensive options and move up through the more expensive stuff, starting with, you guessed it, lowering springs. Now, lowering springs are an interesting one. They really seem to have this stigma of being a cheap cop-out, or that lowering springs just aren't gonna handle as good as some of your coilovers. But I'm here to tell you that that is not the case at all. Lowering springs are a great option for those that don't want or that don't need to be able to freely adjust their ride height whenever they so choose. I personally chose H&R Super Sport lowering springs and Eibach Pro damper shocks for my Mustang for a couple of different reasons. I didn't need to get the car dirty, nasty low. A 2-inch lowering spring is plenty for the car, and the combination of performance-oriented shocks still handle better than stock without sacrificing a lot of ride quality. With that, it's not ever gonna be a show car, and even if I were to take it out to Road America, the set of coilovers isn't gonna change the fact that these cars have a suspension geometry that's been used since 1979, and they aren't really competitive at anything no matter what you do to them. And I don't plan on keeping the car forever, so I didn't want to blindly throw a bunch of money on suspension that I realistically wouldn't utilize. This goes especially for some of your more niche vehicles, where an entry-level coilovers start getting really expensive because it's not a popular platform to modify. From there, you have cars that come with really well engineered suspension from the factory, which most modern sports cars do. From S550 Mustang GT PP's Magna-Ride suspension all the way up to your Porsche 911 GT3s, the suspension components are usually adjustable through the vehicle. They're very expensive and very good at what they do, so changing those wouldn't really be worth it. But if you want to take it to the next level and pull a little bit of ride height out of the car without going too far, lowering springs are a perfect option for cars with adjustable suspension from the factory. So if you fall into either of those categories, I highly urge the use of a lowering spring. It's a great way to extract extra performance without sacrificing quality or your adjustable suspension. Coilovers, on the other hand, are such a good way to take a car to the next level from a performance standpoint and an aesthetic standpoint, and cater to both sides of that in nearly infinite directions. Starting with your super entry-level unbranded eBay stuff that's more get low than it is increased performance. And I really can't recommend these to anybody. A lot of these products don't last very long, and they tend to be poorly made with a high failure rate. If that's the only route you can afford, I totally understand that. We've all been there, including myself. But I would recommend a lowering spring setup 10 times over any of the unbranded stuff, because 9 times out of 10, it's really not worth it. Moving into the universally good value coilovers that I recommend for most people and most vehicles, these are gonna be your quote-unquote entry-level coilovers worth spending money on, starting around $700 and not really exceeding the $1,200 price point. These are gonna be your BC Racing BR Series, Tane Flex Zs, Silver Neo Max, and your Function Form Type 1 and 2 Fortunato 500 series, and then you're kind of starting to get into your KW V1s on your really popular applications, all of which are fantastic choices for any vehicle. Even though I consider these entry level, this segment is made of coilovers that are built with quality materials, have a quality standards and a really decent warranty, a spring rate and damping system that matches your vehicle, and you're gonna get some caster camber plates if your application allows. But probably one of my favorite parts, most of these come with adjustable damping, which is just absolutely wild to me. Anyway, when people ask me which coilovers to buy, I always recommend these. You really can't go wrong with an entry-level brand name coilover for a street car that you beat the hell out of on and off the track, especially with the adjustable damping that you can change before and after the track day. They just offer so much value for the money. But if you do want to take your coilover game to the next level and start getting your adjustments dialed in on a more precise level, or even even start taking competition a little bit more seriously, this is where you're gonna wanna start looking at some more serious hardware. I'm talking about your KW V2s and V3s, your Fortunato 510 series, and even the Dreadnought Pro 2. BC Racing's RM, DS, and ER series, Silver's Neomax two-way, and these are essentially your mid-tier performance stuff that's gonna have progressive dampening and sometimes even a remote reservoir to allow you to adjust rebound and compression damping separately. These are gonna start around that $1,200, $1,300 mark and then start getting into your low 2000s. Now for me, I think even these can be a little bit of overkill for your average enthusiast who's not gonna be tracking the car, especially if you're not being super competitive. But this is a great way to get an edge on your competition without going full balls to the walls with suspension technology and keeping your budget kind of in check. However, if you do want to go balls to the walls and you have the skills to extract every last bit of performance out of your car, race tier coilovers are a must-have. I'm talking about the best of the best, like your Fortunato Dreadnought 3-ways, your KW V4 and V5s, your BC Racing HM and ZR series, your Moton Motorsports stuff. This is really serious hardware. These products are going to introduce not only rebound and compression damping, but high and low speed compression adjustments, inverted dampers, and just quite literally taking every single detail into account to extract the most technology possible, all in the name of performance. But it will cost you. You're looking at starting in the low $2,000 range and reaching as high as $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 for your really high-end brands like Moton. This is really reserved for some really serious competition, but damn is it cool to see products like this come through the door. It's just mind-blowing on how far suspension technology has come. I mean, come on, inverted shocks on a freaking coilover? That's some literal race car that you can just go and buy. It's wild. And last but not least, one of the most expensive and popular suspension choices on the show circuit is going to be air suspension. Air suspension is such a fun and cool way to modify your car's suspension. I mean, come on, it's a nearly infinitely height adjustable suspension. It lets you air the out and slam your car on the freaking pavement, lift it up to drive down the street with an aggressive stance, or lift that like a Silverado truck bed pool party so you can get through the rough streets or even do some off-roading, which I wouldn't really recommend, I guess. It makes cool noises and becomes an entire display point of your vehicle. So what's not to love? Well, a lot of your naysayers will say that the system is a little bit too complicated and unreliable, which really isn't the truth. Anytime I've ever actually witnessed an issue with air suspension, it has been on the fault of the user, not the system. Oh, so your bag ruptured. Cool, well, yeah, you can see where your tire was rubbing on the bag. No wonder it ruptured. Or you have a line leak. Yeah, the fitting wasn't sealed correctly. And my favorite, when someone uses some sort of scissors-like cutting tool and they have a smashed and unevenly cut line going into the fitting. That's never gonna hold air. And my favorite one is bags handle bad. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you and say that air suspension is gonna handle equally to a mid or a high tier coilover on the track, but if you think for any reason that air suspension won't still provide confident handling and take the abuse of a track day, you're completely wrong. And with that, so long as you follow the proper maintenance procedures like draining water out of your tank in humid climates or with harsh temperature changes, you're not gonna get water in the system or freeze your lines in the winter. It's as simple as that. Now, I've personally never ran air suspension in any of my vehicles, but I've installed it a few times and I've driven a bunch of cars with it and it's always been super awesome. There's just such peace of mind being able to adjust your heights on the fly, and as lame as it might sound, airing out at the car show or airing out at the gas station, because it's such a fun and a funny thing to do that gets a lot of reactions and strikes up really fun conversations. If you've ever considered it and shied away, I highly recommend just go for it. Now, cost here is going to be a bit on the high side. The cost of going all out on air struts, tanks, pumps, management, controllers, you're looking at about $3,000 and above. However, this air suspension thing doesn't seem to depreciate a whole lot, which is pretty cool. People who convert their cars back to stock and sell their air suspension usually get about 70% of their money back, and the same can be said for a vehicle gaining about 70% of the value of what they spent on that suspension as well, which is pretty awesome. That means if you play your cards right, at the end of the day, your cost to experience air suspension on your ride really isn't the worst investment you can make on a vehicle, which is still pretty cool. So if you're really looking to make an impression, utilize the function of an adjustable height on the fly, and still be able to take your car to a track day, air suspension's probably for you. So what are your thoughts on the different tiers of suspension? Which one do you have your eye on and which ones have you tried? Let me know in the comments. If you guys want to see more videos just like this one, make sure to slap that thumbs up and leave your ideas down in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and click that bell so you don't miss any of the crazy builds coming your way. And of course, you know where to go for all things wheels, tires, and suspension. FitmentIndustries.com. I'm Sean from Fitment Industries. SeanB.fi on Instagram. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.